3 of the fantasy football season, and here's the top 12 kickers I'm ranking heading into week 3. The first guy is Justin Tucker of the Baltimore Ravens. So far, Tucker, he's been mediocre the first 2 weeks of the season here. But I got to put this guy pretty much each and every week as number 1 because he could kick any field goal. He's one of the most accurate field goal kickers in all of NFL history. And this week he's got a great matchup at the Detroit Lions, where I expect this Baltimore Raven team to be in the red zone early and often, and pretty much this whole game here, obviously. And Tucker, it wouldn't surprise me if he gets double digits. It was a big win for them in week 2 versus Kansas City. And this week at Detroit, I think he'll hit a 50-plus yarder and maybe 2 other 3 field goals with extra points. So right here, I got Tucker at number 1 this week, because this guy each and every week and each and every season is the first kicker taken off the board and one of the best kickers to ever do it. Number 2, Harrison Butker of the Kansas City Chiefs. So the Chiefs last week scored a lot of points but fell short. And I know Butker only hit 5 extra points in that ball game. But this week versus the Los Angeles Chargers, I think he'll have a bigger output and more opportunities to kick field goals. And in this game, I think it's going to be another shootout. And Butker, he, for whatever reason, gets more opportunities at Arrowhead Stadium. So I think this week he's good for 2 or 3 field goals and probably 3 or 4 extra points here. It's a good matchup versus a division rival. And right here, Buck is due for a big game. Number 3, Taiwan Bass of the Buffalo Bills. So Taiwan Bass, he's been off to a good start so far this season with double-digit fantasy points in week 1, and in week 2, 5 extra points made in that blowout victory. But here in week 3, they versed the Washington football team that's given up the most fantasy points so far in the first 2 weeks of the season here to fantasy kickers. And right here, Taiwan Bass, he's one of the young and upcoming kickers in the league here. This week, I think there'll be more opportunities because this Washington defense, it's bend but don't break all the way type of defense. And we saw, like I mentioned, Graham Gano last week have 20-plus fantasy points at the kicker position, which is very clutch and a very huge number, putting up those type of numbers. So this week for Bass, I think he'll have some opportunities, and I think he'll have double-digit fantasy points. Number 4, Daniel Carlson of the Las Vegas Raiders. So Carlson right now the number 1 kicker in all of fantasy football, and he was a recommended pickup this week. And so far, Carlson with an 11 and a 17-point fantasy day under his belt. And right here, he's got a great matchup versus the Miami Dolphins that give up a lot of points. A lot of teams could get in the red zone. And right here, I think Carlson once again is going to reach double digits in this ball game. A few 30 or 40 yarders possibly for him in this game. And I just like what this guy's been doing this season. He's kicking the ball, getting opportunities. This Raider team's taking chances under John Gruden. And once again this week, we're going to see many opportunities, in my opinion, for Daniel Carlson to have another big fantasy day. So I got him at number 4. Number 5, Nick Folk of the New England Patriots. So Nick Folk, he's gone out there this season, and he's playing great ball, and he's officially on the 53-man roster now for the New England Patriots. He was a fill-in guy, but right here after 2 big games for him, this guy's an everyday starter in the NFL at the kicker position, and he's a guy that's been picked up in 9% of fantasy leagues. So week 1, 10 fantasy points versus Miami. Week 2 with the Jets, 12 fantasy points. And this week 3 versus the New Orleans Saints, I think he could get double digits. The Saints defense, they are bend but don't break type of defense, even though week 1 they shut down Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. Last week was more of a contest and more of a defensive performance I could see from the Saints here. So right here, Nick Folk, I think, has another good day, and he reaches double digits here. Number 6, Robbie Gould of the San Francisco 49ers. So Robbie Gould, he's got a good matchup this week versus the Green Bay Packers in a ball game where we should see a lot of scoring and up and down the field from both teams. In week 1 at Detroit, 14 fantasy points for Robbie Gould. And then in a low-scoring victory, week 2 at Philly, only 6 fantasy points. But this week, I think anywhere from 9 to 11 fantasy points I could see Robbie Gould get. He's back home. First game at home for the 49ers. Home opener 2-0. They're ramped up, trying to go 3-0. And I think they're going to just need to keep getting in the red zone to have a chance versus this Packer team. Because this Packer team had their one bad game of the season, week 1 versus the Saints. And now after that, Aaron Rodgers and this team's focused. And they don't want to be embarrassed and hear the naysayers and that was made clear by Rodgers after the Week 2 victory at Detroit. So right here, San Francisco, for them to win this ball game, they got to put points on the board, and if that even means Robbie Gould has to trot out there for a few 50-yarders, that's what it's going to take. And I think in this game, he's going to have a high volume of field goal attempts and turn out with a good fantasy day. Number 7, Matt Gay of the Los Angeles Rams. So the Rams so far off to a good start at 2-0 with Matthew Stafford at quarterback for this team. So right here, Matt Gay versus his former team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think he'll get some opportunities and have a decent game this week. The first 2 weeks of the season, 11 and 9 fantasy points. So I think I would expect similar stats to what he did the first 2 weeks. Tampa Bay, we know, is playing great. We know they're the defending champs. But they're also a team where teams get in the red zone against, but they just don't give up touchdowns. So right here, we could see a few opportunities where they don't finish the drives off the Rams, and Matt Gay would have to settle for a field goal. And he's in a good powered offense here, so I like him at 7. Number 8, Brandon McManus of the Denver Broncos. So the Broncos, another great matchup to have opportunities to be in the red zone and score a decent amount of times this week versus the New York Jets, who are another defense that isn't totally horrible, in my opinion. They're another defense that a lot of teams do get in the red zone against the first few games of the season here, and they're going to have to settle for field goals. We saw Folk get 12 fantasy points last week, and this Denver offense is a little similar, in my opinion, to the New England Patriots, where they're not going to take many deep shots. They're going to be a run-heavy type of team, and this week, Brandon McManus, I think he'll have opportunities in Mile High for 40 or 50-yard chances in the home opener. And he's a kicker I like in number 8. Number 9 this week, Greg the Legs Erline of the Dallas Cowboys. So after a struggle in Week 1, missing 2 field goals and an extra point, Greg the Leg redeemed himself with a game-winning field goal. His time expired in Week 2 versus the Los Angeles Chargers to get the Cowboys the victory. And this week, it's going to be an NFC East matchup in Jerry World on Monday Night Football in Dallas, where we're going to see a lot of points, in my opinion, between the Eagles and the Cowboys. And so far, Greg the Leg, 9 and 10-point performances in the first 2 weeks of the season. And this week, I think, once again, he'll get similar numbers. He's in a high-powered offense. He's in an offense that's getting a lot of red zone opportunities this season. And right here, this game with Philly, I think, could be in the low 20s to high 30 range, where he'll get 2 or 3 opportunities to kick it through the uprights and some extra points. Number 10, Young Hoku of the Atlanta Falcons. Hoku was a recommended start this week at the kicker position. And right here, Young Hoku, he's got a good matchup versus the New York Giants that give up a decent amount of fantasy points to kickers. So right here, Hoku, it's been a struggle so far, but not his fault. 4 and 5 fantasy points the first 2 weeks of the season here. But at the Giants here in Week 3, I expect a bigger game out of Hoku and more field goal opportunities, because both teams, they really can't stop no one on defense. This Atlanta team, they need a win bad. The Giants need a win bad. And I just think both kickers for both teams will have top 12 performances. Number 11, Matt Prater of the Arizona Cardinals. So Matt Prater right now, he's been good in his new home in Arizona so far. The first couple weeks of the season, Week 1, 8 fantasy points. And Week 2 last week versus Minnesota, 11. And Week 3, a dream matchup at the Jacksonville Jaguars, where this Cardinal offense, they'll be operating a lot in the red zone, in my opinion here. And I think at minimum we'll see 2 or 3 field goal attempts with a 3 or 4 extra points in this game for Prater. So he's on a high-powered offense. He's getting a lot of opportunities. And we know he's still one of the best long-range kickers in this league, where he could hit 50-plus pretty easy in his sleep. So right here, I like the matchup at Jacksonville. Great weather, poor defense he's versing. And hey, he's going to have a good game once again in the 5th kicker. I would rank this week here as Graham Genoa of the New York Giants. So Graham Genoa, a recommended pickup this week here in fantasy football at the kicking position. And he's got a good matchup versus the Atlanta Falcons that obviously can't stop many teams. And a lot of teams have found their way in the red zone pretty easy this season. So in Week 2 at Washington, 21 fantasy points for Graham Genoa, where he kicked in that ball game a whopping 5 field goals and 2 extra points. And in Week 1, only 1 point with an extra point. But right here, this Giant Falcon game, like I mentioned, I think it's going to be a pretty high-scoring ball game for both teams, and both field goal kickers will get 2 or 3 opportunities for field goal shots, and then a few extra points added onto it. So I could see Graham Gano hitting double digits once again in this game, and that's the top 12 kickers I'm ranking for Week 3 of the fantasy football season.